one way to have the attitude that you want going into the day is to just think for a moment, well, I declare an outbreak of peace. So I was talking about that circle. If you have a top-down culture, you have to do what the leader says. And you can't declare an outbreak of peace yourself. You have to wait for somebody to vote for that. No. What we're saying is each one of us makes that decision. I mean, a friend of mine was telling me, friend of people on Zoom, you recognize this story because we heard it at Coming to the Well. She grew up in a family where people have been in the military. And again, you know, this is a circle for everybody, right? For everybody. And when she was a girl, she would ask her parents, you know, why is there war? How come someone can't stop it? So it's just this amazing sense inside a child. Now, children, what's so lovely is that even at a young age, children have this sense of fairness and care. A mother told me that when her son was 3 in nursery school, there was a girl who was very scared of thunder. You probably had thunder last night. And this boy in his heart said, I don't want her to be afraid. And he went over to her and he looked at her and said, don't worry, it's not going to come in here. So that's how we're made. We're made with the way of caring, the way of peace. Another friend of mine said, you know, something happened to me in my preschool. I grew up, my grandmother spoke Spanish. Our heritage is Latina. And a boy in my preschool would push me against the wall all the time and make fun of me for speaking Spanish. So she stopped. And she said, then I stopped being able to talk to my grandmother. So what I've been doing is I've been collecting stories of children's work for an outbreak of peace. And when I used to go on plane flights, I asked a man next to me, he asked, you know, what do you do? What's your work? I said, oh, I'm a peace educator. Because that's been my job my whole life. And I said, I'm collecting stories of times that children stood up for something that they felt was right. He said, I've got one for you. So let me read it to you. He was playing basketball in Waterbury, Connecticut, which is, I think, not exactly near where Ted lives. A member of his team in basketball missed a free throw, and it was at the very end of the game. So there was like tensions were high. Out of sight of the coach afterwards, a boy on the team began to harass that one. He said, you really stink. How could you miss that basket? It's your fault that we lost. So you can imagine that was a crushing time. Probably that boy never forgot that moment. But another 6th grader knew it was wrong. And he stepped up and he said, well, listen, he said this to the team, especially to the boy who was doing the harassment. He missed it, but the rest of us on the team, we missed plenty of shots the whole game. We all make mistakes. So you can't say it's any one person at fault. It's a team thing. So I pass on to you that habit of collecting these stories. I just find them so empowering about the human spirit. And so we're going to look at this weaving because I have brought symbols of interconnection. So there are 3 textiles I'm going to show to you today and talk about their meaning. And this is a Mayan textile from Guatemala. And the girls who would learn to weave that pattern, they were doing the same pattern that their great grandmother had done. So imagine what that feels like. And you might have objects in your own family that have passed on. Let me show you some features. Okay, that's the long tail of a quetzal bird. So you see it repeating? Now, then this part that's thicker, that's a tree. And that's specifically the tree of life. So what this means is that there are patterns of humans being with each other where we weave together. That's what I mean by an outbreak of peace, that everywhere we go, we have an opportunity to make things better. I've been leading a peace camp for 28 summers. And it's down at Woolman Hill. Do people at Woolman Hill in Deerfield? Such a beautiful spot. Quaker Trust. And what's so great is Annette's granddaughter, Sarah Cole, who I bet you've met Sarah. She not only was a camper there, but she was also on staff. And this is a favorite song of the campers. And when my dear friend Darlene Graham, when her son had died, and there was a memorial recently, he is deaf. And so I did this song to honor him. And I think you're gonna like it a lot. So you'll see me doing sign. So how about I'll do it once, the words are there. It's build fire in my soul. It's right underneath the covenant. So however you like to learn songs, you can read it or watch it and listen or try it. But I will slow it down after I just do it once so you get a feel for it. I know how to build fire in my soul. I know how to open up my eyes and let it show. I know how to shine my light through the stormy, stormy night. I know how to build fire in my soul. So let me slow it down and show you emotions. And it's fine to put the paper down and have your hands free. And again, I trust that whatever way you want to do it is fine, whatever you want to do it. So at your heart, you identify your soul. I. No, you tap your head. Now how? You start in this hand shape and then you turn it. Maybe that's like a bud. Let's do how again. How. So every line begins that way. So let's do that again. I know how. And then the first line says build. It's such a fun sign. You've got a structure. You're going to have the same hand shape with both hands, but you build. Build, build, build. Fire is like fire hands. In my soul, you make a little space, so you go in. My comes back to your heart. Then you keep that hand shape. I think you'll like this. This is the sign for soul. Isn't that beautiful? So let me sing and do with you the first line. I know how to build fire in my soul. The next line begins the same way. I know how. Now we're going to use this flick. Okay, on either side of your eyes. Open up my eyes. All those words are just contained in that motion. Open up my eyes. And for let it show on your palm, you're going to show something. You're going to push it forward. Open up my eyes. I know how to open up my eyes and let it show. I know how to shine my light. Begins the same way. I know how. And right over your shoulder, you make a fist, and then the sunlight comes out. Shine, same word, my light. Let's try that again. Shine my light. For through, you have a wall that looks impenetrable. And then you go through it. It's a fun sign. Through. Through. Now you make claw hands. These hands show anger, and they also show a storm. So let's do the storm from last night. Stormy, stormy night. Here's the horizon. The sun goes down. I know we just did a lot, so let me do that whole thing. I know how to shine my light with you. I know how to shine my light through the stormy, stormy night. And last line is the same as the first. I know how to build fire in my soul. Thank you. Thank you for trying that. There's some girls who love that so much that it became like a comfort song for them. Before we do joys and concerns, let me tell you a really interesting Shelburne Falls story. Ed, I wonder if you know the story about Foxtown, the new owners?
Yes.
Isn't that a great story?
Yeah, I know both those guys.
Oh, well, so I'm doing some Outbreak of Peace stories. This is about the planting of goodwill. So picture a diner on the main street, Bridge Street, and the owner had been the owner she'd been there for 21 years, first as a waiting on tables. One day, she put up signs that said business closed, business for sale. She was done. And two business owners in town who didn't really know each other. One of them, whose name is Kunal Patel, owns our main grocery store. And what a person he is. Right on the side of his church, for some it's kind of like that, of his store, there's a refrigerator of 3 food. And if somebody comes and they're out of milk that day, he'll give them free milk. You know, he's that kind of a guy. So he was standing there looking at this for sale sign when out of the store right there, the optician, Tom Miner came out. And Tom said to Kunal, I love this diner, but my concern is for the 8 girls who work there. They need money for groceries and gas. This is their income. Now, poof, they don't have a job. You can't take 8 people on in your store, Kunal. I can't in my optician business. What are these girls gonna do? I know all of them. I'm in there all the time. And Kunal said, why don't we buy the diner? Isn't that amazing? And that's what happened. They didn't know each other. They became partners. They said to the girls, we're holding the mortgage, we're holding the responsibility, but this really belongs to you. And so they also, not only did they not lose their jobs, but they had this new sense of their own personal power. It was just, it's amazing. So I did want to, so when I told Tom I was going to tell you all today, he's so humble. Oh, you know, oh, but that's part of why it was so great to do that. Another story that I want to tell you is about Juanita Nelson. And so Juanita Nelson, this is her quilt. So I said there's 3 special textiles, Tree of Life. So when it was hard for Juanita to live up at Woolman Hill, when she was in her 90s, she brought many friends and said, please take some of my belongings. And I don't know how I was lucky. Boy, I was lucky. Now, Juanita Nelson grew up in Cleveland, African American. And when she was 16, her mom said, we're going to go on the train all the way down to Georgia to see my family. So 1939, Black mother and daughter. Okay, you can start to think, what might they encounter? So the trouble began when they got as far as Cincinnati, Ohio, which is South Ohio. And the conductor said, when they had to change trains, you got to go to the back car. So they walk into that back car and it's pretty filthy. And something in Juanita said, I can't do this. Mom, I can't do this. So she decided that she would not sit in that car. So basically she did what Rosa Parks did. But she was 16 and it was 1939. And she sat down in every car. So when I try to picture it, she goes in, she looks at everybody. Maybe it takes the 16-year-old's pluck, and so she sits down. Then she goes to the next car. And during the offertory, I'll tell you the whole story in song, the complete story. The last story that I have at this point relates to the words Pace Bene. Revera's son works for Pace Bene, which is an organization that teaches nonviolence. So she writes books for children. This is one of the best books I've ever read. And what she's trying to say is, you hear a lot about fighting, and you think, well, maybe the only other choice is to flee. So, but no, there's the way between. So my story is from a family reading this book, and the children, the boys who have been accustomed to play fighting, they said, let's play the way between. And in the book, it's represented as like a Aikido kind of movements where you kind of work with your partner. And so she's been finding out that this book has been having a big impact on families. I want to give a chance for a really important moment in every service, the joys and concerns. And Annette's going to facilitate this.
I'm going to start with a candle for Chantal, knowing that she injured her knee so badly this week. She's not on Zoom, right? Is she on Zoom? Mark? Chantal? All right, well, we're thinking of Chantal. We hope she's not in too much pain. She broke her kneecap or something. We'll get more information and try to see what she needs. And I also want to light a candle for Tony. Is Tony on today? Tony's had shingles, and so she hasn't been here for a number of weeks, suffering from shingles. So that's for Tony. All right, who else would like to light a candle for
I'll speak from here. As I often do this time of year, I point out it's time for miracles. And out in the backyard, there's a whole pile of them. And the miracle I point out to folks is the acorn. How does that thing know how to make such an oak tree? That's the miracle. So I invite everyone to go to the pile, pick up as many as you think you'd like to give away, and tell people about the miracle of the acorn.
Right, I don't know if you know about them. They were trying to break those. They were already looting.
I know. They have a mind of their own.
Yeah. Anybody else have anybody on line want to light a candle?
Would you light a candle for coming to the well?
Mark, should I light a candle of gratitude?
Sure.
We had a couple of days with our daughter out on the coast, and it was really, we don't get to see our daughters enough. So this time of year is really nice because we're starting to get to see them a little bit. And she came out and she rented a house with a hot tub just for us, 'cause she really needed it.
Oh. Oh, thank you, Annette. It's so great. Let's do a prayer then for all those named, including the oak trees. All those named and unnamed. And in your heart, please add yourself. Just take that moment to really breathe in your heart and place yourself in this circle for prayer. Everyone's spoken. And a prayer for this beautiful world that we share. Blessed be, amen. I gathered these this morning for the 6 beautiful trees back there. Thank you. Now, I told you about Pace Bene. We're going to, for our responsive reading, we're going to be doing a quote that I learned from the Pace Bene nonviolence service. I think you'll enjoy it because it's kind of offering an idea of something that you can do at any time when there's upset, when you feel off balance. She says, go into your heart and soften your heart by feeling a flower there. It's like they're trying to find practical things a person can do in daily life. So you'll be reading C. C is for congregation or community or cherished people. So I'll do the S, speaker. What I'm advocating here, says Pema Chodron, is something that requires courage. The courage to have a change of heart.
The reason it requires courage is because when we don't do what we should that heart in our hearts, and that holding tightly to certain views, then we are left with the underlying uneasiness that we are trying to get away from.
Whenever there's a sense of threat, we harden. And so, if we don't harden, what happens? We're left with that uneasiness, that feeling of threat.
That's where the real journey of courage begins. This is the real work of the peacemaker. To find the soft spot and the tenderness and the very uneasy place. And stay with it.
If we can stay with that soft spot and stay with a tender heart, then we are cultivating the seeds of peace. There's a beautiful song in West Side Story that you might remember. Let me sing it to you. Make of our hearts one heart. Make of our hands one hand. Now it begins. Now it starts. One hand, one heart, one hand, one heart. And so in our time of prayer, let's breathe into our hearts. Feel the rise of your chest. So first you're aware of the movement of your outer body, moving up and down with your breath at your own speed. Another miracle. And now breathe into your heart. Find out how to do that. Now, as you're breathing into your heart, would you feel the flower, that soft, strong flower in your heart? If you like, but you don't have to, you can allow a challenge to surface and practice keeping that flower. Let's take a moment. Two more breaths. Thank you. Thank you for joining in that meditation. When I was describing the service, I said prayer and meditation and images of outbreak of peace. Gandhi is someone that Martin Luther King learned from. Gandhi says, I think you'll like this, prayer is the key that unlocks my morning and the bolt that secures my evening. Isn't that great? I didn't know this, but it turns out that when Gandhi would do prayers morning and evening, he didn't just do prayers of his own faith. He did Muslim prayers and Christian prayers and Buddhist prayers, not only the Bhagavad Gita, Jain as well, Sikh. He loved the Sermon on the Mount. His all-consuming passion, according to Beverly Lanzetta, was to alleviate suffering. And he felt that that was inextricably linked to prayer. So when he was in prayer, he had that communion with God. So I am hoping to help you also be enthusiastic about this idea of declaring outbreak of peace. You have the right to do that. And so we're standing with Gandhi, and we're extending a quest for the purity of heart. I mentioned the Mayan weaving. In the Mayan culture, there's a phrase in the Kesh. It means, I am another yourself. So I'm going to read it in Spanish and English, and it's in your bulletin. Feel free to join me or to listen or to read along. Tú eres mi otro yo. You are my other me. Si te hago daño a ti, if I do harm to you, me hago daño a mí mismo. I do harm to myself. Si te amo y respeto, if I love and respect you, me amo y respeto yo. I love and respect myself. We come to the moment of concretely showing our love for this church through the offertory. And I'll be sharing a song that tells that in more detail, the story of Juanita Nelson. I don't know if any of you know the Daigle family that used to live in Bernardston, Mackenzie Daigle. And I believe that her father has passed, but she and Laura Botkin's daughter, Eva Botkin, we went to visit Juanita. So here I am with two girls who were maybe at that time like 12 and 13. And Juanita had never told anyone that I knew that story about the train. So she sees these two young people and she says, well, let me tell you something I did when I was your age. So I had to make it into a song. Juanita Nelson was the person who, with her husband Wally, started the custom of the garden of the farmer selling, and she started the free harvest supper. So we rushed to the train and the station in Ohio. We landed in the back car, the worst part of this plane. Spider webs and dust bites, the seats were torn up. Only for black passengers, the segregated train. I was just 16, it was in the 1930s. I spoke up because I knew what I didn't know. I looked at my mama, she looked back at me. My heart was beating hard, I knew where I had to go. Whatever age I be, I will follow what's true for me. World can't change me, the truth inside is clear. I must do what I feel is true. The train left the station, I left where I was sitting. I knew what was ahead before we traveled very far. I hope that this song helps you picture this. Mama caught my eye, she did not try to stop me. I told her how I felt, I have to leave this car. I would not stay in the place they tried to put me. I couldn't breathe, my hands were tight. I entered the next train car, just like Hero City. I stayed with my convictions, I said that was right. No one threw me off the train, the conductor did not stop me. I made my way from car to car, then back to Mama's place. I don't recall the passengers, I just recall their silence and the look of love that I saw upon my Mama's face. Thank you. One of the leaders of nonviolence, Barbara Deming, she says that we catch courage from each other. Isn't that what happens here in this congregation, that somebody does something and you say, oh, that's how it can be done. Or someone dares to speak up about the miracle of acorns. And you go, yes, that's right. So as I go into this sermon, An Outbreak of Peace, I want to, as I was saying, widen the sense of what it means. Let's begin with the acorn, because ironically enough, I collect acorns so that if I was with a class of children, I would give them each an acorn. And I would say to them, we're going to practice using more than our five senses. So imagine your acorn right now, because I believe that widening your senses is one of the skills of peace building. So we'd smell it, we'd look at it, but we'd also take our sense of generation. That means we're able to look at it and sense its full story, what it could become. The other is the sense of communion. What I mean by that is that whether or not that acorn becomes an oak depends on other factors, depends on the community that holds it. So the acorns that are out there that are trying to root down with their great tenacity. So if someone were to take one and say, I really want an oak to come right here, that would be one way for community. Or in the way it's been forever, the community of the sun and the rain, the community of the squirrels spreading them. So as we look at the acorn, we practice peace by looking and widening our senses. The second way that I want to share about peace is the sense of mending. If you're somewhere and something happens that you don't think is okay, believe yourself. And even if you don't know what else to do, you could just say, I'm a little uncomfortable. Or could we talk more about that? Some people like to say, ouch, and just kind of catch attention. I had something happen at Journey Camp. It was very challenging. And I'll tell it to you. There was an older girl who'd never been there before, unlike Sarah, who had been there many years and kind of knew how things were done. You know, we have, I believe in holding, that it's said that your health depends on the holding environment you are in. So I explicitly talk about agreements at Journey Camp. The agreements are to treat everybody in a friendly way, including yourself. The agreements to talk things out instead of shouting or instead of ignoring. To tell somebody if something happens that isn't okay with you. Like, for example, the story I told about the girl who was being pushed because she was speaking Spanish. If there had been an agreement that she could tell someone, maybe that could have been stopped. Another agreement we have is fresh start, to give people a chance to grow. So here's what happened. So there was a new camper who was not, she hadn't really latched onto the agreements. And I found out that secretly she was needling and tearing down and belittling other campers. And she looked on someone, she picked one of the young girls who had trouble speaking. She had a speech impediment. And the older one didn't know I was there. So we're coming out of the building. There's the youngest, there's the teen, there's me. She looks at the young girl and says, get ready for something hard. She says to her, you are going to have a really hard life. And it's just like, it just broke my heart. I had to act fast. What to do? Here's what I did. I mean, there are lots of ways to do it. I said to myself, it won't work to ask her to apologize because it won't be meaningful. Does that make sense? So what I did is because we had a relationship where I could hug her, I took her off to the side and I just held her hands and looked at her and said, well, we know that's not true. So I was bringing her back into the circle. I just want to take a mop and just erase those words so she didn't have to carry them the rest of her life. So that's another example of stepping in. Now, a funny thing happened to me at Shelburne Falls. Here's the third textile. Where I live on Main Street, which is near the river, people will put on the sidewalk things they don't want. And so this lovely rug was there and I just loved it and I grabbed it. And I said, well, why did someone let this go? Was it because of these little thingamabobs, like the pieces of the rag rug that aren't complete? And I thought to myself, no, actually, I like that because it's the essence of peace building, that you keep mending. You don't throw anybody out. You keep giving ourselves a chance to grow. So I'm going to put this right here. That's my example of we are menders wherever we go. Some of you might know Randy Keeler. He was on jury duty in Greenfield, and it was a really serious crime. I don't remember what it was, but Randy said everyone decided that that man was guilty, but he didn't think so. And so when he said, you know, I can't agree, in other words, they don't have consensus, people were pretty angry at Randy. I said, Randy, you know, come on, I want to get back to my job. But they had to go through it. So they went on longer. And as things were allowed to unfold, they all agreed the man was innocent. So talk about courage. So what happens for me is I love these stories because when I hear about one person's courage, suddenly I think, well, I don't know if I could do that, but Randy can do that. Maybe I can do that too. It's just part of this. We're in this time of building. I mean, think of like the millions of people all over the world who've been declaring an outbreak of peace, whether it's from like a soup kitchen or, you know, a friend of yours has an operation, you bring them food. For me, that's an action that fits right into here. So I've been talking about how the big and the little peace building are all important. Recently, I got to see again, August 28th, 1963, Dr. King, that famous speech. I want to put it in our sermon today. We join in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation. That's what Dr. King said at the start. He described his vision of America. He said words like, "Hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. Let us not wallow in the valley of despair. Justice rolls down like a mighty stream." And one of the phrases he said that really stood out for me was, "All flesh shall see it together." A biblical quote, and I think what that means is you're trying to go for a place where this inner tuning fork, your conscience, is saying, don't we all see what should be changed here? Do we all see this together? So there's this feeling of we extend a blanket. Wherever we go, we say, I want to make sure that things are working the way they could. Another friend of mine, I said that I would be doing some big examples. She was driving by the Embarcadero in San Francisco, and her headlights at night, suddenly she sees a man gripping a woman. And she didn't even think about it. She just drove her car, parked it, left the headlights on, and said, and here's her words, "Not in my world, not in my world." And so he just was so startled, he ran. And she was saying he had a big knife. So she drove that woman home, and they stayed in touch. They stayed in touch. I love how music gives us hope. And so would you take out your words again? And we're going to look at the bottom. In the bottom, you can see that Aileen Vance from California took the words of Dr. King on that day and made this beautiful song. Let's see, the pattern is that we'll say a line and then we'll have the refrain, "Let justice roll down, roll down." Just find it. Aileen Vance and I are in a group called the People's Music Network that Charlie King and Pete Seeger started. And it's been going over 40 years. And the executive director lives in Greenfield. Then, there is no freedom, the wise man said, let justice roll down, roll down. Shelter and bread, let justice roll down the mighty street. I sang that at the speed of a freight car. Let me slow it down for you. Now that you hear what it sounds like. There is no freedom, the wise man said, let justice roll down, roll down. And the poor cry out for shelter and bread, let justice roll down the mighty streets. Oh, children, don't you get weary, walk together, believe in the dream. When the way gets rough, we will make a new way. Let justice roll down the mighty street. Hatred, so these are, you may have heard Dr. King say this. Hatred will never drive out hate. Let love roll down, roll down. Remember our hearts make us great. Let love roll down like a mighty stream. Won't you do come together? We walk together, living a dream. When the way gets rough, we'll make a new way. Let love roll down like a mighty stream. Number 3. When brutality threatens our daughters and sons, let peace roll down, roll down. May our voices rise up louder than the guns. Let peace roll down, mighty stream. Don't you do, don't you get weary, walk together, real your dream. When the way gets rough, you make a new way. Let peace roll down, mighty stream. Step by step, one by one, let justice roll down, roll down. You can kill the pocket, but the dream lives on. Justice roll down, mighty stream. Won't you do, don't you get weary, walk together, in the dream. When the way gets rough, we'll make a new way. Let justice roll down, mighty stream. Let justice roll down, mighty stream. And finally, in this sermon, I give you the way of gratitude. The gratitude that we feel to the people that we know who've given us an example. I remember a boy saying to me the name of his neighbor who broke up the fights when he was a child in the neighborhood. So before we do our closing song, I would like very much to open the space for anyone who wants to shout out the name, speak out the name of someone that you feel grateful to in declaring an outbreak of peace. So as you think about who that might be, let me return to Hawk's flute. And in this moment of reflection, would you feel your power to declare an outbreak of peace? And think about who you might want to say if you want to speak. Just do a moment of music. As we speak these names, my hand is on Juanita's quilt because we're building a quilt right now of names of people. And so as you say a name, I'll go to a different square. So we're really building the quilt here. And now would you start us? Sorry. Would you name a person, a peacemaker you'd like to thank? And I think this might be a non-Heat fan moment. Barbie. Barbie. Would anyone else like to speak?
Fred Stang.
Fred Sting. Jacqueline Johnston.
Nelson Mandela.
Nelson Mandela. The Dalai Lama. The Dalai Lama. Thank you so much, Kim. So we just built our quilt, and I recommend this book, Mitamu, because she was in this area. It turns out that the Connecticut River, which was called the Quinnipiac, was a transnational highway for trade. And at one point, there were 5 tribal nations. There was Agwam, named Orinoco, Nawatik, Pakamtuk, and here's Sakoki. And she was there with 3,000 people, primarily women. And we can imagine it was with the intention of protection and welcome. And down at Little Agwam, there were all kinds of efforts for peace building. So I put in Witamu and Moambika and all this beautiful coming together of First Nations and European Americans to go forward into the future that we want together. So to seal this program, the song right above it, how many people have heard Last Night I Had the Strangest Dream? Is that a familiar song? I thought it might be. I learned it from the singing of Pete Seeger. We sing it as our closing prayer. Let this be our closing words. Last night I had the strangest dream I ever dreamed before. I dreamed the world had all agreed to put an end to war. I dreamed I saw a mighty room of women and of men, and the paper they were signing said they'd never fight again. And when the papers all were signed and 1,000,000 copies made, they all joined hands and bowed their heads, and grateful prayers were prayed. And the people in the streets below were dancing round and round, and guns and swords and uniforms were scattered on the ground. Last night I had the strangest dream I ever dreamed before. I dreamed the world had all agreed to put an end to war. And so, each in our own way, we declare an outbreak of peace. I carry the flame. I carry the flame. Thank you so much. Circles open. Have space now to join in fellowship. Tell me the story of Hop Henry. And thank you for your presence today. I just love this church. I'm so glad to be here.
Find out what book this was about.
Sure.
You tell me.
Did you guys get